Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steven with Freeze Peach Gaming. This is where I talk about pop culture, politics, and where the two collide. Please consider giving me a like, comment, subscribe down below, and share this channel out because that is the best thing you can do to give me some more reach, which I desperately need. Don't make me beg, but I will. Today, I'm going to do a continuation on my previous video about the progressive alignment changes that are going on in Dungeons & Dragons, which I will link in the iCard up over here. Please give that a watch if you want a little bit of background knowledge on what's going on here. But I'm going to talk about the consequences of Dungeons & Dragons removing racial traits and typical racial alignments from D&D games and the future D&D systems. They have even retroactively changed PDFs of previous books that have come out in the past. For instance, Volos has been changed on certain racial traits for things like kobolds and goblins and beholders. But today I want to talk about the consequences behind them removing all of these racial traits and racial alignments from the game. So the idea of removing the alignment, I think, initially completely removes the idea of being a heroic adventurer. Dungeons and Dragons games, since they have been going on in the mid-70s up until very recently, the broad idea behind it is you are playing a heroic adventurer. You are going out and conquering evil and fighting back the injustices of the world. This is your goal. It honestly, it makes for a really good fun game. Like, I know that playing a lawful good character seems like really basic and very, bland, but when you're actually sitting at the table playing a lawful good character, combating the evil and injustices of the world, it becomes a really fun game. And you actually get, depending on the system that you're playing, particularly if you're in the OSR and you're playing like in an AD&D game, you're actually going to most likely get some of the best prizes from doing the adventure. So I think that they're trying to remove the idea of a heroic adventure because they don't want people to be heroic. They want people to capitulate and follow along, and they want people to have a homogenous ideology. We're going to get more into that in just a bit. I think another part of the reason that they're doing this is because the homogenization of races, it won't actually increase character individually, but it will water it down, which they somewhat want. See, without intrinsic traits, the races are no longer unique on a cultural or behavioral basis, but they are only outwardly distinct. And this follows along with WotC's progressive ideology. Diversity can only be expressed in the modern progressive view, can only be expressed through outward appearance and sexuality, while thought, your thinking, must be singular. You must think the way that they want you to think. You must think the way that everyone else around you is supposed to be thinking. Whether or not they actually believe these things, they will most certainly only express certain opinions. And we see this happening very often, particularly in the university system. I mean, look at the demographic politically of professors in universities. They're all almost entirely liberal progressives. And a lot of them are also socialists. And so they want to have this singular homogeneity of thought throughout society while having an outward appearance of diversity, because then they're going to be able to play the oppression Olympics games, and they'll be able to put people on certain rungs of the ladder for who is more oppressed and who deserves more things throughout society based on past transgressions. And on top of this, anyone who doesn't think the same way that they do because they believe they are so righteous must be evil. And since Western culture can't judge other cultures based upon our Western values, all other cultures must either be inherently good or neutral. I talked about this in the past video with the views on Middle Eastern Islamic theocracies and how they don't think that it's right for us to judge the Middle Eastern Islamic theocracies. Now, to be perfectly clear, I'm not entirely for interventionism. I don't think we should go over there and force them to live under a representative republic with a constitution similar to our own. Everyone who's ever tried it has failed. These people fought a revolution in 1979 to implement their Islamic theocracy in which it is a very totalitarian Islamic theocracy. They fought to implant the injustices upon homosexuals and women and black people, Africans in particular. And, it's kind of tough to remove those things from society. Now, I do also believe that there are certain things we could do to help them out, to help out these people who are actually oppressed within their society. But I don't think that us going over there and conquering them is a good way to do it. I digress. This is why they don't want us to have the racial traits or the cultural traits within the game, because they're worried that we're going to be placing these traits upon real-world cultures that they don't want us to judge, because that would be an objective way to look at things. And subjectivity must go first, because these people's ideology is backwards. It's twisted. That's why they always have to have their own debates within their own societies, and you'll see it happen all the time on debates on Twitch and the like. They'll only bring in one person who has an alternate view of them, and there will be 10 people screaming at them about how racist and horrible and oppressive they are, and how they're all for the destruction of, enter oppressed class A, enter oppressed class B. You're a racist, a homophobe, an istophobe, whatever you have. And they're also doing this because the cultural differences, they want the cultural differences within the game to reflect their desired worldview. These people believe in a socialist utopia that will one day come about. And indoctrination is their primary goal. This is why these socialist progressives, which are very much taking over the higher level gaming spaces, particularly over at WotC, you also see it I saw it happening at Paizo years ago. So it's going on at Paizo, it's going on at Wizards of the Coast. They believe in the socialist utopia. And this is why a lot of these people, these socialists, have been taking over other subcultures and other hobbies. This is why people like Karlin Boroshenko, who is very much a, 20-year ago liberal, is how you could view her, she got pushed out of a knitting hobby. She got pushed out of her own hobby of knitting because she wasn't enough of a socialist progressive, because she wanted to go out and actually meet with Trump supporters and see how they treated her. So she goes to a Trump rally wearing a Bernie hat, and everyone's just like, oh, hey, I don't agree with you, but come on in. Maybe we'll change your mind. They were nice to her. Then she goes and she does a similar experiment where she's not actually wearing a Make America Great Again hat, but it was a similar hat. It was actually a bit of a joke hat, similar to the MAGA hats, and she goes to a Bernie rally, and they treat her like garbage. And she sees this progressing through her particular hobby, her particular subculture of the hobby, and knitting in the online spaces where people will share knitting patterns and the like, and they take over that. And they push her out of her own space that she helped to build up, and she was a part of the community. The same thing is going on in Dungeons and Dragons, particularly for the actual Dungeons and Dragons cultures out there, the actual fan groups out there for real D&D made by Wizards of the Coast. Those are being completely taken over from top to bottom by progressive socialists. And you even see it going on a little bit in the OSR. Now, the OSR has become a bit more split, to where you have this very entrenched side of the OSR who wants to purely judge people based on their intrinsic characteristics, and if you don't follow along their ideology, you are an evil person. Then you have the other side of the OSR, who are your, what you would expect, your 30 to 50-year-old male, beer and pretzel style D&D players that just want to not just relive the good old days, but they just want to continue enjoying their hobby as they've been enjoying it for the predominance of their life. They don't like the direction that the game is going. But because you aren't in line with the future progressive socialist ideology to get them to their utopia, you are a problem and you must be pushed out. And so those, I feel, are a couple of the consequences that are going to happen with WotC taking all of these things out. Any of the people who were still, beer and pretzels role players are going to now find it even more difficult to still just have your, standard crusade campaign where you're trying to get a say you're trying to get to the top of the mountain and fight the dragon and get the MacGuffin from the dragon and bring it back to the village so that you can cure the disease. This is going to become extremely more difficult if the dragon isn't inherently evil, inherently oppressing all other people in the society, because we have to view it in a subjective manner. So I think they're actually going to be losing a lot more customers. We see this happen. It's the get woke, go broke, cliche out there of they're trying to engender themselves to a very loud minority of people that are online and Twitter and talk about their game. Now, I will say with Dungeons & Dragons, there are a lot of these people who do play the games, particularly in online spaces like Discord. But they're hoping to keep these people by entrenching themselves more into their ideology, and in order to keep with that ideology, they have to remove the supposedly racist tropes that have been built upon these games that really are at the core of these games, and they're doing this by watering it down and removing things. And I mean, it's progress, Montag. Progress. We have to make sure that nobody is offended in these spaces, because these people have a complete ideology built around being offended, and anyone who is offended is now automatically oppressed. Your words are violence. Your silence is also violence. So if you don't go along with what they're saying, you are being violent, and therefore they're going to be allowed to attack you, to try and completely destroy the business model that WotC had built up over years. That's all I have for this today, ladies and gentlemen. Please have a wonderful day. Consider giving me a like, comment, and subscribe down below, like I already said at the beginning of the video, but I like repeating myself at the end. Have a wonderful day, and never be afraid to speak your mind.